in chapter 4, we're going to be laying the groundwork for all of our different tissue types. So there are quite a few. This is a little bit bigger chapter to get through all of the important tissues. All right, so first of all, just what those tissues are. So there are 4 major types of tissues. So we have epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle, and nervous tissue. So these are based on what they look like, the extracellular matrix, which is stuff that they release from them, as well as their function. That's what determines which category they are placed in. And then just a couple terms. Histology is the study of tissues. Biopsy, you may have heard of this before, especially with cancer. This is removing tissue for diagnostic purposes. And then autopsy, I'm sure you've heard of after death. So this is examining organs of a dead person and looking for the cause of death in that circumstance. So starting with our epithelial tissue. So some of the characteristics, and again, there are quite a few. So maybe making a table, which there are a few of those coming up. But however, you can kind of organize this information to help you kind of learn it and solidify it in your brain, whatever works for you. So mostly these have very little extracellular matrix. So again, they're not secreting a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of stuff on the outside of them. So it's mainly made up of cells. So the tissue is mainly just a bunch of cells stuck together, not a lot of extra stuff in between those cells. And the main thing with these is they cover the body's surfaces as well as forming glands. So they're going to be on the outside surface. So think about like our skin, the lining of all of our tracts, like the digestive system, the respiratory system, the lining of our heart and blood vessels, and then as well as our body cavities. So again, kind of any surface with a lining as well as those glands are going to have epithelial tissues. Now the distinct kind of surfaces of these, so there's what's referred to as a free surface or apical surface. They have a basal surface and then also a lateral surface. So again, the whole cell isn't necessarily the same all the way around the cell. It has these distinct kind of surfaces that we'll talk more about. And they also, because it's on the lining, they're attached to other tissues. So they have what's referred to as a basement membrane, and that connects that basal layer to other tissues. So like our skin, we have the epidermis, which is on the outside, and then the dermis. So again, that epithelial tissue would be attached to another tissue using that basement membrane. And then again, the cells connect to surrounding cells and some extracellular matrix. These are avascular. So again, they're not going to have blood vessels moving through them. So instead, since blood isn't coming in to bring oxygen and nutrients, instead it moves by diffusion from the connective tissue that's underneath it. Now these do have a lot of regeneration. Again, we think about the skin or even the digestive tract. So again, these layers are commonly lost, so they're constantly being replaced or regenerated. Now this basement membrane, again, this is connecting that epithelial tissue to the underlying tissue. There are 2 different layers. It's made up of what's called the basal lamina and the reticular lamina. And the basal is made up of the lamina lucidum and the lamina densea. So again, 2 parts to that. And these specialized extracellular materials are secreted. So things like collagen, glycoproteins, and proteoglycans that help support that. And again, it's supporting and guiding the cell migration that's occurring during tissue repair because, again, it doesn't have blood coming to it. So that underlying tissue, that underlying connective tissue is supplying the nutrients. So this basement membrane helps to kind of guide that migration. It allows for movement of materials in and out of those epithelial cells. Now, kind of looking here, we can see it a little bit better. So again, this is the larger connective tissue on the bottom, but then we have the epithelial tissue on the outside. Now, what connects those two, the outer epithelial tissue to the underlying connective tissue, is that basement membrane, which is this layer, change colors since everything's red there, which is that basement membrane. Again, it's connecting those epithelial cells to the connective tissue. And then again, just the divisions, that basement membrane is divided into the reticular lamina and the basal lamina, but then the basal lamina is further subdivided into the lamina lucidum and the lamina densa. Now, what are these epithelial tissues doing? We know they're outside on the linings, so they're protecting the underlying structures. So like the lining of our mouth or the skin, it acts as a barrier, so it helps prevent microbes from coming in. It allows passage of materials, so the nephrons in the kidney, where water and ions and nutrients are moving in and out of the kidneys, that's occurring through the epithelial, so it's thin to allow that diffusion to occur. It can excrete substances like mucus, and it can absorb those substances. So again, think about food and nutrients coming in from the small intestines. So lots of functions going along with these, but all makes sense because, again, it's on the outer surface, so it provides that barrier as well as protection, and allows for passage of nutrients and fluids. Now, the way that these get classified, so there are many different types of epithelial tissues. They're mainly based on the number of cell layers. So we have simple epithelial, so this is one layer. Stratified, meaning it has more than one layer. Then there's also pseudo-stratified, meaning false stratified. So this appears to be stratified, but whenever you actually look at it, all the cells are actually connected to the basement membrane. So it is actually simple, but it looks stratified. And then there's also transitional. This is a special type of stratified, again, multiple layers, where the cells actually change shape, though, from cuboidal to columnar to squamous whenever they're stretched. So they may have one shape in one position, but they look a different shape in another position. So again, as they're being stretched. And then the different cell shapes, we have squamous or squamous. These are flat or scale-like. Cuboidal, as the name implies, they're kind of cubed, so they're equal in height and width. So they look like squares. And then columns are more rectangular, so they're taller than they are wide. And again, for each of these, so we can have simple squamous, we can have stratified squamous. So again, we kind of combined these, the number of cell layers with the cell shape to come up with the names for these tissues. We look at some examples here. Again, simple epithelium, we only have a single layer. Stratified, there are lots of layers. We have multiple layers of cells stacked on top of each other. And then as far as the shape, we have the squamous, which are flat. That's what both of these examples. So this is a simple squamous epithelial. This is stratified epithelial. That's on the bottom. But we also have cuboidal and columnar cells. Now, the next few slides are just the different tables from your text that go through all the different types. So for each of these, what you want to know is, again, understanding what simple means, single layer, and then the different types. So it's the simple squamous. So again, understanding what that means. So that's really the structure, as long as you know those terms we just went over. But then also some of the functions that go along with it, and some of the locations that can occur. You do not have to know all of these tables, but again, just understanding the basic structure and some of the functions of where these are found and what they're doing. So we have our simple cuboidal that are here. These are mainly helping with secretion and absorption on those kidney tubules and glands. The simple epithelium, or the simple columnar, again, single layer. This helps move those particles out of the bronchioles, like mucus, that gets secreted and gets rid of some of the microbes that we have. Our pseudo-stratified, again, this is where it looks stratified. It kind of looks like a thick layer, but they're all actually attached to that. These are mainly used for making and secreting mucus. So we find those on like the nasal cavity, as well as in the respiratory tract. Then our stratified, we have stratified squamous, again, lots of layers of those flat cells. That helps protect against abrasion, so we think about our skin with that. The stratified cuboidal, lots of layers of those cubes, again, secretion absorption. These are what a lot of our glands, like our sweat glands, are made up of, salivary glands as well. And then our stratified columnar, protection and secretion, so like mammary glands are used for this as well as part of the male urethra. And then the transitional epithelial, again, this is accommodates that fluctuations in volume. So again, this is where it's kind of changing shape as it's being stretched. So the lining of the urinary bladder and part of our kidneys and the urethra. Now some of the functions, functional characteristics of these, again, they're the simple epithelial, whether it's squamous, cuboid, or pseudostratified, just kind of highlighting these. So again, just another way of looking at this information. So diffusion, filtration, secretion, protection, mucus, and then miscellaneous. These are all functions of epithelial. So which cell types are doing which ones? And that's just continued on here with the stratified. These are more involved in protection against abrasion, the movement of mucus, and that kind of stretchiness that can occur. And that's just in the transitional. All right, so now some of the free surface modifications that can happen. So what they actually look like. So they can be smooth. This is called endothelium. It can be folded. So especially in the transitional epithelium, again, we're changing shape based on that stretching. So it can have folds that are there. They can have microvilli. And these are tiny little projections that increase the surface area, so more things can be absorbed or secreted. Some specialized microvilli that have various sensory organ or sensory receptors on them, like the inner ear, so that we can sense different vibrations, as well as cilia can be attached to help move the mucus. So again, these are just some other things that can occur on that outer surface. Again, smooth endothelium can be folded, and then we could have these microvilli or even cilia. Now, some of the cell connections, so again, tissues are made by cells being connected to each other. So this would be on the lateral surface, which is on the side. So the lateral surface, as well as the basal surface, which is where it's attached to that basement membrane. So some of these connections, they help provide permeability, so it allows for movement. It helps bind the cells together, and it allows for communication between cells. And there are a few different types that we'll look at. So desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, we have tight junctions, adhesion belts, as well as gap junctions. And these are highlighted here. Let me get rid of this. So we have here the gap junctions. So as you can see, there's literally a pore or a hole that goes between these two cells that allow for that intracellular communication. We have also these tight junctions, so it's more kind of like they're stapled there together. These adhesion belts, where we have these connections or kind of belted ways that are going to keep things from moving across them. The desmosomes, a little bit thicker, that occur on both cells on that layer or on that membrane. And then the hemidesmosomes is going to be on one side, so it allows it to attach to that basement membrane. So just looking at these a little bit more. So again, the desmosomes, these are kind of disc-like regions that are subjected to stress. So they have especially adhesive materials between them, so kind of like a glue or different protein filaments that extend into the cytoplasm, especially seen on the stratified squamous epithelium. The hemidesmosomes, again, it's just half of it. So it's attached to the epithelium and then into the basement membrane. So it's only half of it. And this actually prevents movement of the tissue. So it kind of puts it in one spot, kind of locks it in one place on that basement membrane. Then the tight junctions help hold the cells together and form kind of permeability barriers. So it prevents things from moving past or continuing on. And then the adhesion belts, again, kind of as the name implies, this is typically found below those tight junctions, and that's anchoring the epithelial cells to each other. Again, prevents passage of material between cells, but adds extra strength to those tight junctions. Then the gap junctions, again, these aid in that intracellular communication. So the tight junctions, they're not allowing permeability, but gaps do. So it lets ions and small molecules move from one cell to the other. Its exact function isn't quite clear, specifically in the epithelium other than intracellular communication, but it does help coordinate function of cardiac and smooth muscle by allowing electrical signals to pass to allow for some contraction. And it may help coordinate movement of the cilia in some of those epithelial tissues. Now, a little bit about the glands. Again, these are also made up of epithelial tissues. So these are secretory organs, meaning they make something and they secrete it. So there are two different types. We have endocrine glands and exocrine glands. So endo means in and exo means out. So endocrine, they have no open contact with the exterior, so there are no ducts. And so they have an extensive work of blood vessels, and these are mainly used to make hormones. But again, they have no ducts, they have no contact essentially with the exterior. No, exocrine, though, they are open contact to the exterior, so they have ducts that are moving from within the gland so that they open into the free surface of the epithelium. So again, endo is kind of secluded. Exo, though, is able to reach out using those ducts. And those exocrine glands get classified either by their structure of that duct or the structure of their secretory portion, the part that's actually secreting things, and even sometimes how they're secreting things. So a little summary here about those epithelial tissues. Again, I know this is pretty small, but again, all these different tables and pictures are just different ways, whatever works best for you to identify them, to know what they're doing, where they're found, is what we want to focus on. All right, now moving into our connective tissues. These are very abundant. We have lots of connective tissue, so every single organ we have has connective tissue. Unlike the epithelium, it does have a lot of extracellular matrix, a lot of stuff on the outside. They have lots of different types and functions. So some of the functions of all connective tissue, they enclose the organs and kind of separate them into layers. Again, it connects tissues, hence the name connective tissue. So it connects one to the other like a tendon or a ligament attaches muscle to bone. It provides support in movement, can be used to store things like our fat tissue. Fat can also be used to cushion and insulate, transporting nutrients like our blood, as well as protection, thinking about like our immune cells that protect us against invaders. Now the cells of these connective tissues, so we have blast, which will be creating a matrix. So we'll talk about osteoblast. So they're making bone. We have cytes that just have and kind of maintain the matrix. And then we have clasts that are actually breaking them down. So building is blast, breaking them down are clasts. So osteoclast, break down bone, osteoblast, build the bone. Osteocytes are just kind of hanging out, making up the bone. All right, so then these connective tissues, or CT, they form that structural framework. This includes bones, cartilage, and fibrous. So again, just using some of those terms, osteoblast, form the bone, osteocytes maintain it, osteoclasts break it down. We have chondroblast, that makes cartilage, chondrocytes maintain it. We have fibroblasts that are making connective tissue, and then the fibrocytes that are going to be maintaining that fibrous connective tissue. And so the different types of connective tissue, so unlike epithelial where they're all kind of like layers or different shapes, these are completely different functions from one connective tissue to another. So the types of connective tissue we have adipose or fat cells. So again, those are used for the storage of of fat and of energy. We have mast cells. So these are common beneath different membranes, like our smaller blood vessels. They are involved in the immune response, so like inflammation that occurs is mainly maintained or caused by these mast cells. We have white blood cells or leukocytes that respond to injury and infection. We have macrophages that come together. These are going to be go through phagocytosis to actually take in and break down damaged material or foreign invaders. So some of them are fixed, just meaning they have to stay in one place. Some of them are moving around. And we also have platelets that are just pieces of blood cells that help with clotting. And then we have undifferentiated mesenchyme or stem cells that can become multiple different types. So again, we have lots of different types of connective tissue, and so we have lots of different types of cells to make up that connective tissue.